In today's video, we're continuing our coverage of the dumpster fire known as Aptera. Aptera has been trying to develop an electric tricycle since 2006. The company has already gone bankrupt once, and to date has never delivered a single tricycle to a customer. Since 2019, Aptera has raised almost $150 million from retail investors via equity crowdfunding. They've burned through almost all of this money. On October 16, 2025, Aptera listed its shares on the Nasdaq. Due to a lack of interest from institutional investors, they are not able to do a traditional IPO. They instead did a direct listing, whereby existing investors can sell their shares. Over the past 5 years, over 20,000 individual investors have invested almost $150 million in the company's equity crowdfunding campaigns. These crowdfunding investors had no source of liquidity. There was no way to sell their shares. With the direct listing, these investors finally had a way to sell. When trading began on October 16th, the price immediately collapsed. It ended the day down 60%. I expect the share price to continue falling towards zero over the coming weeks and months. In this video, we'll analyze Aptera's direct listing. We'll also look at the company's operational performance since our last video. On October 14th, 2025, Aptera filed its prospectus, which includes a lot of interesting information about the company. They say they have substantially completed their production intent vehicle design. That means that the production intent design is still not completed. It's just almost completed. They also say that since 2019, they've built 5 drivable prototypes. These are the 5 prototypes. In 2020 and 2021, they built 3 prototypes, which they called the Alpha Series. In or around early 2025, they built another prototype called Hermes. In June of 2025, they unveiled their latest prototype called Artemis. None of these prototypes are the final design that they will put into production. When they unveiled Artemis, they also announced plans to build a 6th prototype, which will be called Gemini. They say Gemini will be a production weight validation vehicle. This is a very nebulous term, so I guess Gemini will be the same weight as the vehicle they eventually plan to bring into production. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the Gemini will be the final design that goes into production. As of the time of them filing their prospectus on October 14th, Gemini still doesn't exist, because they say they still only have 5 drivable prototypes. Aptera has long struggled with funding. Over the past 5 years, they've raised $150 million from crowdfunding, but that money comes in gradually over time and is barely enough to keep the lights on and pay their own salaries. They need a large, one-time influx of capital to build even a low-volume production line. Back in June of 2024, Aptera attempted to raise $60 million from institutional investors. At the time, they provided this investor presentation. They said $60 million would be enough for them to begin low-volume production by the end of the year. As it turned out, institutional investors had almost zero interest in Aptera, and the company failed to raise the $60 million they wanted. Thus, they still haven't entered production. In the prospectus, they say that their previously announced plan was to complete validation and testing by the end of 2024 and commence low-volume production in 2025. However, they did not achieve this timeline due to delays in securing the necessary funding. The real situation is even worse than this. Not only have they not completed validation and testing, but they don't even have a production intent prototype. Gemini does not yet exist, and as we explained earlier, it's not even clear if Gemini is production intent. Now Aptera finally has a plan to raise enough capital to enter production. They did a direct listing on the Nasdaq, so they did not raise any capital directly, but they did secure a $75 million equity line of credit from a company called New Circle Capital. After the stock starts trading, Aptera can sell $75 million worth of newly issued shares to New Circle. The price will be a 4% discount to whatever the trading price of the stock is. New Circle likely expected the stock price to collapse once it started trading. They only wanted to pay the market price, not the inflated price Aptera sold its shares for in previous crowdfunding campaigns. This will give Aptera $75 million, which is supposedly enough to get them into low-volume production. Also, on October 15th, Aptera released a so-called online roadshow on its YouTube channel. This was intended to promote the stock going into the Nasdaq listing the following day. The online roadshow included a presentation. They claim they already have a production facility in place. They also claim to have grant funding from the California Energy Commission, or CEC. Let's first talk about the CEC grant. Aptera is based in California. The CEC gives grants to EV startups to promote clean energy and create jobs in the state, but they don't want to waste money by giving it to companies that are failing. So the grants typically come with operational requirements. In the case of Aptera, they received a grant that is worth up to $21.9 million, but so far they've only received $2.5 million. To unlock the remainder, they need to achieve additional milestones. They need to manufacture and sell 50 vehicles by February 2026 and 500 vehicles by October 2026. It is extremely unlikely that Aptera will meet those milestones. On October 15th, the day before the listing, Aptera's co-CEO Chris Anthony gave an interview to the Schwab Network.
You know, Aptera is inching into production readiness, and as we validate vehicles and get ready to start manufacturing, obviously funding is always on our mind, so this is a great next step to getting the company funded and off to production in the next 9 to 12 months.
Chris Anthony says the company will start production in 9 to 12 months. 9 months from now is July of 2026, so even according to their own publicly stated timeline, they're not going to qualify for the CEC grant, which requires them to sell 50 vehicles by February. Thus, in my opinion, it was extremely misleading for Aptera to talk about the CEC grant in their online roadshow. They also claim to have a production facility already in place. Their supposed production facility is actually just their corporate headquarters in Carlsbad, California. This is where they're going to do their low-volume production. This building is located in a suburban area and is completely unsuitable for manufacturing vehicles. Where are the workers going to park? You'll need to have convoys of semi-trucks constantly coming in to deliver materials and parts, as well as ship the completed vehicles away. This will cause massive disruptions to traffic. Real car factories are generally located in the middle of nowhere, so you have enough room for all of your parts, inventory, and your workers' cars, etc. I would be shocked if Aptera can produce more than a few hundred tricycles per year at its Carlsbad headquarters. At such a small production rate, they're not going to have economies of scale, and the per unit production cost is likely to be very high. Production capacity is one thing. Another question is whether or not people will be willing to buy them. They intend to sell their tricycles for $40,000 each. That's very expensive. For comparison, the Chevy Bolt EV, which is a real car, starts at just $29,000. Aptera boasts about having almost 50,000 reservations, but these reservations only require a $100 refundable deposit, so they're largely meaningless. From the very beginning, one of Aptera's main selling points was that solar panels can recharge the battery to give you 40 miles of range each day for free. Here, in an animated commercial released in 2020, they claim it can recharge 43 miles per day. To this day, Aptera has repeated this 40-mile number almost constantly. In January of 2025, co-CEO Steve Fambro was interviewed by Fox Business. The very first thing he talked about was the 40-mile-a-day solar range.
Tell me how this thing works.
Hey, thank you for having us. Our secret is really efficiency. By making a super efficient vehicle, we can use a smaller battery, making it more affordable. We can go longer range, and then we can use our solar technology to make it charge itself up to about 40 miles per day.
What about on a cloudy day?
On a cloudy day, you might have to charge it less or plug it in every couple of weeks, but for the most part, most Americans won't have to plug it in.
Here's co-CEO Chris Anthony on the Schwab Network on October 15, 2025, one day before their NASDAQ listing.
But the solar really acts as a trickle charger to the vehicle, providing you free fuel for the life of the vehicle. Every day that you drive less than 40 miles and you leave this out in the sun, you basically don't have to plug it in, you don't have to do anything except drive. So
in their October 15th online roadshow, they again claimed that Aptera is designed for 40 miles a day of solar range. Getting 40 miles of free driving range per day sounds pretty good. Many people drive less than 40 miles per day, so you'd never even have to plug your vehicle in to recharge the battery. The problem is, the 40-mile number is a lie. It's not a slight exaggeration or an optimistic spin. It is a lie. A typical Aptera customer will not get anywhere close to 40 miles of solar range, even on sunny days. In June of 2021, Aptera posted a video on its YouTube channel where Steve Fambro explains how they get the 40 miles per day number. I won't play the video here because it has background music that may be copyrighted. But if you want to watch the video yourself, you can find it on Aptera's YouTube channel. It's only about 1 minute long. Fambro says that the solar panels on the tricycle can generate 700 watts at peak power. Peak power is the maximum power the solar panels can generate. Over the course of the day, that will generate 4,000 watt-hours of electricity. 4,000 divided by 700 is 5.7, so he's assuming you'll get peak power for almost 6 hours per day. The Aptera supposedly consumes 100 watt-hours per mile. Take 4,000 watt-hours divided by 100 watt-hours per mile and you get 40 miles of driving range per day. It's a pretty simple equation. There are only 3 variables. How much power can the solar panels generate? How many hours a day can they generate power? And how much energy does the tricycle consume per mile? The problem is, all 3 of these numbers are incorrect. Let's start off with the first number. Steve Fambro claims the panels can generate 700 watts at peak power. Telling the truth is easy. Lying is hard. If you lie about everything for a long time, sooner or later inconsistencies will appear. Lying is especially difficult if multiple people need to keep the same story straight. The largest pro-Aptera channel on YouTube is Aptera Owners Club, or AOC. As one of Aptera's biggest supporters, AOC frequently gets access to Aptera's top executives for interviews. In January of 2025, AOC interviewed Reed Thurber, who is Aptera's lead solar engineer.
So what is the highest amount of solar that you've seen generated off the full solar package?
Right now, with these specific panels, instantaneously, we've seen almost 500-ish, but that's in specific conditions. And there's a lot of optimizations we're doing with these panels that these ones haven't seen yet, that are still kind of on the bench, if that makes sense.
Okay, so you expect it to be higher power output?
Instantaneously, probably between 500 to 550 is what we expect right now. And then in specific conditions, so on average you won't see that.
Yeah.
Because it has to be
like optimal conditions.
Like
the sun has
conditions.
to be at the right angle.
It has
you
to be
have
at the
park with
perfect
the right
angle.
orientation.
Exactly, and even recently we've started being like, we could get more power if we like leave the hatch open and point in a specific way. But that's not really the normal conditions these vehicles are going to be in.
Right. You're not going to leave them parked with the hatch open.
No, you're not going to leave them parked with the hatch open. Like maybe we can make like a safety mesh or something, but right now that's not what people really want to do.
Right.
But there's some new cell types coming out that that can interchange with these that get a few percent higher efficiency, which is really good.
Are they Maxion as well?
They're Maxion, yeah.
Okay.
They are Maxion cells as well.
Reed says the highest power they've ever seen on their solar panels is almost 500-ish watts. In other words, less than 500. Probably significantly less than 500. Reed also makes sure to stress that they only achieved this in specific conditions. So what are these specific conditions he's referring to? It sounds like what he's referring to is leaving the rear hatch open. This provides a better angle for the solar panels. This is completely unrealistic. Nobody's going to leave their trunk open for hours at a time in their driveway. Reed says maybe they can get new solar cells that are a few percent more efficient, but that's not going to be any massive improvement in solar output. Steve Fambro assumes you'll get 5.7 hours worth of peak power per day. This is also unrealistic. The amount of sunlight you get per day will vary drastically based on where you live. The sunniest place in the US is this place here, straddling California, Nevada, and Arizona. This is where Death Valley is located. Even here you only get 6 hours worth of peak sunlight per day. The sunniest states are Arizona and New Mexico, which get 5.5 hours of peak sunlight per day. Even this is less than the 5.7 hours Steve Fambro is assuming. The Deep South, which most people will consider to be pretty sunny, only gets 4.5 hours per day. When you have solar panels installed on your house, they're on your roof. Assuming there are no tall trees nearby, there will be very little shade obstructing the panels. The Aptera will be parked in a driveway. The driveway will have much more shade from trees, bushes in the house. Almost nobody has some massive parking lot where they can park their Aptera with no surrounding objects to block the sun. Now let's look at the final metric. Steve Fambro says the Aptera consumes 100 watt-hours of electricity per mile. Aptera has never validated this efficiency number. Aptera is only once given an efficiency number. In March of 2025, they claimed that one of their prototypes achieved 122 watt-hours per mile on a road trip they did. This was a self-reported number that was not verified by anybody. This is already worse than the 100 watt-hours per mile Fambro used in his calculation. But there's an even bigger problem. The road trip started in Flagstaff, Arizona and ended in Imperial Valley, California. This is kind of a weird place to end the road trip. Aptera's corporate headquarters is located in Carlsbad, California. Why not end the road trip there? According to the US Geological Survey, the Imperial Valley is also known as the Salton Sink or the Salton Trough. It lies 70 meters below sea level. Imperial Valley has one of the lowest elevations of anywhere in the US. Flagstaff, Arizona has an elevation of 7,000 feet above sea level. There is a decrease in elevation of more than 7,000 feet in the road trip. In other words, they're mostly driving downhill. This will artificially boost the efficiency data. Let's redo the calculation with more realistic numbers. According to Aptera's own lead solar engineer, the solar panels generate less than 500 watts under specific conditions that are unrealistic. So let's say the real peak power you can expect to generate is 400 watts. In the Deep South, which most people would consider to be very sunny, you get 4.5 hours of peak sunlight per day. But the Aptera is parked in a driveway which will have some shade. So let's reduce this to 4 hours per day. That gives 1,600 watt-hours per day. We have no idea what Aptera's efficiency is, but it's almost certainly worse than 122 watt-hours per mile. They only achieved 122 watt-hours per mile by driving downhill. So let's assume 150 watt-hours per mile on a flat road. If anything, we're being generous. That'll give you 10.6 miles of driving range per day. In addition to selling tricycles, Aptera also plans to sell its solar panels to other customers. For example, they claim to have signed a deal with a trailer manufacturer called Polydrops to sell them solar panels. In the October 15th online roadshow, Steve Fambro talks about this.
Well, Aptera has been already shipping product to its first paid solar customer, Polydrops. We've developed a product for them that's built on our same assembly line as the production panels, using the same materials, mostly the same processes, so it's able to utilize all of that same capital. And we ship, I think, weekly to them. We've even developed a reusable dunnage, as they say, so the panels go there and then the dunnage comes back and we load it up with new panels.
Steve Fambro says Polydrops is already paying for Aptera's solar panels. On May 19, 2025, Aptera made a Facebook post saying they'd begun deliveries of solar panels to Polydrops. May 19th is within the second quarter, yet in Aptera's income statement there is zero revenue in the second quarter. So what's going on? If you've already been delivering solar panels to Polydrops since May, and they're supposedly a paying customer, why haven't you recognized any revenue? As of June 30th, they also had zero deferred revenue, so at least by that point, nobody has paid them for any solar panels. On May 19th, Aptera claimed that the solar panels they delivered to Polydrops at that time marked the start of real-world use by customers. If they're actually being used by customers, this implies that it's not a trial or test run. So why didn't Polydrops pay them in the second quarter? None of this makes any sense. Over the past 5 years, Aptera has raised $147 million from equity crowdfunding. During the crowdfunding phase, there is no liquid secondary market for Aptera's shares. Aptera just set the price themselves. It was kind of arbitrary. Throughout 2023 and 2024, Aptera sold shares to crowdfunding investors at about $10 per share. In 2025, they increased the price to around $14. Prior to the Nasdaq listing, they conducted a 1-for-3 reverse stock split. Adjusting for the stock split, crowdfunding investors paid $30 to $40 per share. Aptera has 31.7 million shares outstanding, so the valuation at the most recent crowdfunding was $1.3 billion. At the end of the first day of trading, Aptera's stock price closed at $8. The retail investors who bought in during the crowdfunding are now sitting on a massive loss of 75 to 80%. The last thing that we're going to look at isn't terribly important, but will at least give us a good laugh. Aptera often talks about how good their vehicles will be for the environment. If you have an Aptera, you can drive that around instead of driving an internal combustion engine vehicle. This will result in less carbon emissions and is thus better for the environment. In his interview on the Schwab Network, Chris Anthony takes his environmental claims to the next level.
That's what our passionate community wants, is they want us to be a healthy company. They want us to ship as many of these things as possible, because every one of these we put on the road is like taking 10 combustion vehicles off the road, and we think that's just a great thing for the planet.
Every tricycle they put on the road is like taking 10 combustion vehicles off the road. I don't even know how to respond to that. Alright guys, that wraps it up for this video. What do you think about Aptera? Let us know in the comments section below. As always, thank you so much for watching and we'll see you on the next one. Wall Street Millennial, signing out.